So over the years, we've done a bunch of videos on these cheap knockoff Amazon carburetors. Good experiences, bad experiences, and we've learned a lot about them. But here we go again. So I think the circumstance that led us to buying this particular carb, and this one as well, is probably common to why somebody would want to buy one of these things. So here's the situation. A few weeks ago, I picked up this 99 sports off a marketplace. Not a running bike. It had compression, but it's missing a bunch of stuff, missing a carburetor. So I looked at the bike and I says, yes, I want to build a rude, stripped down little hyperactive paint shaker with terrible ergonomics. Because that's my favorite kind of motorcycle. So I'm going to take this bike, do whatever I've got to do to it. I'm going to build a motor for it. I'm going to build a serious motor for this thing. But in the meantime, I don't want it to be just an inanimate object sitting around. So like I said, it's got compression, it's got spark, it's got all that good stuff. So I need a carburetor. Now here's my choices. I could go buy a brand new CV40. It's going to cost me $300, $325, $350. Bolt it on and go. That's a lot of money to spend for something that's just going to be temporary. So I said, all right, next best thing, I can go buy a used CV40 off a marketplace for like 75 or 100 bucks. And I'm probably going to have to throw a kit at it, throw another like $30 on top of that. There's always going to be issues. Or I could just go straight to Amazon and dial up one of these puppies for 35 bucks. $35. Like, how do you not buy this thing, especially when it's for a temporary situation? And especially because since I've come to know these things so well, I know what I can get away with, I know what to look for, and I know for a fact that I'm going to be able to bolt this thing straight on that engine and it's going to fire up and run exactly the way it's supposed to. But there's a lot to know about these things. It's a minefield. And just to generalize it now, there's an inverse relationship between reliability and complication. Like everything else in life. The more complicated something is, the less reliable it's going to be. And so here's the range. If you're talking about a small, like a weed whacker, a lawnmower, a minibike carburetor, yeah, no problem. It's a no-brainer. Stick it on there and you'll be good to go. Mid-range carburetors, like motorcycle carburetors, if you're careful and you know what you're looking for, you can actually get a really good deal. They'll function for you. Automotive carburetors, now you're crossing into another area, and the shortcuts that are taken in terms of material will bite you. So, and I'll explain all that as we go, because we had a bad experience with a Carter BBD knockoff not too long ago, and I'll describe all of that. So here's the thing with these carbs. They start off, the people who copy them, right, start off really aces, okay? Any feature, any design element that's in the original carburetor is copied faithfully, exactly. So the people who actually draw these things out to be, or CAD them, whatever it is that they do, they reverse engineer these carburetors perfectly. And every step of the way, things get a little weirder and a little sloppier. So they start off with the right design. And actually, in this case, with the CV40 carburetor, they actually improved the design. The original Harley-Davidson version has a plastic elbow in here for the fuel supply, and this is metal. So it's actually an improvement over the original in that respect. All right, so they start off as faithful reproductions of the original. Then it goes to the actual manufacturing process, and this is where the corners start to get cut. Because carburetors are never made out of, let's say, original or brand name carburetors are never made of just bare aluminum, raw bare aluminum. But these things are, and that's where you run into your first big problem with these. The original version of all of these carburetors are made out of an alloy, and or some of them have anodized parts, and so they resist oxidation. Because these things are bare aluminum, they're prone to oxidation. Now, this isn't really a problem if the carburetor is in constant use, if fuel is always flowing through it, if the moving parts are always moving. The oxidation never has a chance to actually build up. And so you're good. The problem happens when they sit for any amount of time, because as they sit, the aluminum oxidizes, and this is where you start to run into problems, especially with the automotive carburetors. So referring back to that BBD that we had on a Barracuda last year, we had an Amazon knockoff carburetor on that thing. And what we found was the piston for the metering rods had oxidized itself. It was in the high vacuum position all the way down, and then it never released because the bore oxidized around the piston. It's a very tight fit, as it's supposed to be. Now, this is going to be a common situation in any of your Carter carburetors, Rochester carburetors, anything that uses a vacuum operated metering rod setup inside the carburetor, you're going to have this problem. So what will happen is you'll take it out of the box, bolt it on the engine, turn a couple of screws to get it to, idle right and do all of that, and it'll function fine until it has to sit for any amount of time. And at that point, the raw aluminum starts to oxidize, and these things like these tight fitting pistons inside will seize. So that's something you got to be aware of. If they seize all the way down, it'll just flat spot. You hit the gas and you won't go anywhere. If they seize in the all the way up position, the engine will idle fine, it'll run okay, but it'll drink gas like there's no tomorrow. So that's something to be aware of. If you're going to buy a knockoff or an Amazon automotive carburetor, here's what I recommend you do. Anytime this thing has to sit for any length of time, let's say a month, 2 months, take the carburetor off the engine. Fog it with a light oil, like WD-40. Make sure you get it all into all of the passages. Put it in a plastic bag and let it sit. When you're ready to put the car back into service, then take the carburetor out and then reinstall it. And it'll be fine. They'll run forever. As long as the carburetor is in constant use, as long as there's gasoline splashing around inside the float bowls, it won't oxidize. The gas will just wash the oxidation off as it happens, if it happens. When these pistons are moving up and down with the engine running, it won't oxidize. It'll always keep that aluminum clean. So don't give it a chance to oxidize and you're okay. Once the oxidation starts, it's hard to stop. We had that situation with that BBD where this piston had stuck in the bore. We cleaned the bore, and then a few weeks later we went to use the car again and it was stuck again. So once the oxidation starts, there's really nothing you're going to do to stop it. So keep that in mind if you're buying an automotive type of carburetor. But let's talk about these motorcycle carburetors, because not only did I buy the one to get it running, but I also picked this one up, and for afterwards, just to show you the difference. Here's the throttle blade for the one that's going on there, and that's the throttle for the engine I'm going to build for it. But I bought this for $35 also, mostly because even if I don't use this carburetor, it comes with parts that I can and will use on a better version of it. I'll get to that in a minute. So the quality of the material is one thing. Now, fit and finish is another. One of the problems we had with that BBD, and I think that this is possible on any of these carburetors, was that on that one there's a brass vent tube. So the aluminum is substandard, but the brass parts, it's brass. They're as good as gold. They're not gonna deteriorate. They're not gonna oxidize. So anything that's brass in there, don't worry about it. Needle and seat assemblies, you get the general idea. Now on that BBD, it has a brass vent tube that's fitted into the top of the carburetor. It overhangs the throttle. And what we had happen was I was revving the engine. We caught this on camera, on the video. I was revving the engine. That brass fitting danced its way out of the carburetor and fell down inside of it. Luckily, it didn't actually go into the engine. The throttle was closed by the time it hit, so it got stuck on the throttle blades. But that could have made for a bad day. So when you get one of these carburetors, you want to make sure that everything is fitted in there good. Like for instance, make sure that all of these various brass pieces are either screw, this is a push rod for the accelerator pump. But make sure that anything that's pressed in there is actually pressed in there and not just like loosely fit. Because again, they start out as like perfect drawings, then they cut a little bit of corner when it comes to material, and then they cut another little bit of corner when it comes to fitting them together. So all the way down to the packaging, I'll get to that in a minute. So make sure that anything that's brass that's pressed in there is actually pressed in there. Now, there is one exception. You see, people like to just say, oh, well, it's junk, it's completely junk, it's all junk. In this particular carburetor, the body of it is a raw aluminum. Yeah, it shouldn't be. It should be an alloy, it should be anodized, it should have some sort of protection against oxidation, but it doesn't. But they did do something with the slide. If you look inside there, the slide is a different color. The slide is actually, I don't know what treatment it is. I don't know if it's an alloy or if it's anodized, but it's treated so that it won't oxidize. And the bore, again, see, like I said, when you keep these things in constant use, and there's gasoline splashing around and keeping the aluminum inside wet, and the slide is always moving up and down so the bore itself won't oxidize as long as stuff is in motion. But here they actually did go the extra step, and that slide is not just plain raw aluminum, so it won't oxidize. So here's the big thing I think anybody who's considering one of these carburetors for any use needs to know. They're not really for the novice, okay? So, and what I mean by that is, if you're going to use one of these carburetors, you can't be afraid to go inside of it. So the first thing, as soon as you take one of these things out of the box, the first thing you want to do is pull it apart. You want to knock the float bowl off of it. Regardless of what kind of carburetor it is, what the application is, you want to knock the float bowl off of it. Because finding foreign materials, paper, sawdust, fingernails, all kinds of stuff, you're going to find things in there. These two carburetors, no, I didn't find anything in there, but you need to check anyway. And you want to check to make sure that anything that's pressed in is going to be right. Now also, especially with these motorcycle carburetors, unlike, let's say, lawnmower carburetors or automotive carburetors, these motorcycle carburetors come with a set of generic jets in them, but they also supply a range of other jets. So this is a copy of a CV40, and Harley-Davidson used this carburetor on a bunch of different applications over the years. And each application has its own specific part number, because the carburetor is going to be calibrated to the engine it's intended to be used on. But these are generic, and because they're generic, they don't know what jets to put in. They'll just put in an average set to get you up and running. And so with this one here, they supplied three pilot jets and 3 main jets. So you can't be afraid to dig in and actually get inside this carburetor. And that's why I say they're not really for novices. They need to be inspected. You need to make sure everything is tight. And then eventually you're going to need to tune it to your application or settle for something that just isn't going to be right. Now here's another thing that'll bite you in the butt too. We talk about the metallurgy. Obviously, taking the bowl off and making jet change inspections and jet changes and stuff like that means screwing and unscrewing it. Well, the hardware used for the screws, they're very chintzy, cheap screws. They strip out very easily. So make sure you're using a screwdriver that's proper. These are a flathead. These are Phillips. Make sure that you're not using no mismatch between the screwdriver and the screw, or right away they strip out. You can replace them with good screws. They'll take the same ones as the original. They're the same thread pitch, they're the same length and all of that, so that's not a problem. But you do have to be careful with these original ones. Also, when you go to screw them back into the carburetor, raw aluminum doesn't really hold up very well, and the cheap screws aren't the perfect pitch. So you'll find it's very easy to strip these out or cross thread them. So never over tighten them, make sure there's a lock washer on there and make them just kind of cute, and keep the threads lubricated. Anytime you take the screws out of one of these carburetors, lube the threads before you screw it back in. And again, don't lock it down. You'll pull the threads right out of the aluminum. Just nice and snug, but no more than that. For the money, you can't go wrong. 35 bucks. Now here's an interesting thing that I found when I popped this one apart to inspect it. So you would think, well, it's a Chinese carburetor. It comes from China, so you would say that everything in there is Chinese. But here's the gasket that was in this carburetor, and I don't know if you can read this. Interface Performance Materials, made in USA. How do you like that? I figured, okay, it's going to be only like written in Ching Chong, like when you undo a Chinese firecracker in his newspaper. But no, it's an actual legit American product. So, but that's why I bought these things. That's this story with them. Like, they'll function fine, but you have to know what you're up against. With the automotive carburetors, when they're not in use, like I said, fog them with WD, put them in a plastic bag, and then put them on when you're ready to go. On these motorcycle carburetors, and same thing with fogging them with the WD, but you can leave them on the bike. Just make sure that you hit that drain screw there and let the bowl drain. Make sure nothing gets in there, and then fog it. You can put the stick like on WD, and then fog it like that, and then seal off the opening. And they'll sit for a whole season without giving you any problem. I know this from experience. But if you don't, they will start to flake and oxidize inside, and it'll form a gel. It'll form a gel at the bottom of the bowl, and it'll start to clog the main jet. I've had this happen before. So there you go. They're not for everybody. You can't possibly beat the deal on these things. Just the jetting. So this is the carburetor that I'm going to put on the engine that I'm going to build for this bike. But if for whatever reason I decided I want to go with the real thing instead of this, it comes with extra jets. It comes with the hardware. Just the value of the parts that come with these things is well worth the price. Like, for instance, everything that's in these carburetors will interchange with the proper original version of them. So jets, gaskets, needle and seat assemblies, all of that stuff interchanges. So just for that alone, they're worth the money. Let's talk about the packaging for a second. Because, like we said, there's a step down every step of the way. They start off as faithful reproductions. Then they cut some corners with materials. Then they cut some corners with fit and finish. And then finally, they package them. So all of these carburetors come in the same basic package. They come in a box like this. And they all come with a fuel filter, which is a nice touch. Thank you. They come with an assortment of hoses and vacuum lines, fuel line, I don't know, whatever they're intended to be used for. You're going to use this? I'm not going to use this. But it comes with it anyway. It's a nice touch. Throw it in the back of your toolbox. And then, for whatever reason, each of these carburetors comes with a random generic spark plug. A spark plug, for a V-twin engine, it comes with one. It doesn't even resemble what goes in that particular engine, an F7TC, probably for like an iron head. But that's besides the point. They all come with just random spark plugs. So, now what do you do with it? I don't know. You put it on the side and hope you come across an engine that fits someday. They don't come with soy sauce, chopsticks, or a fortune cookie, which a fortune cookie would be an awesome touch. You guys who sell these things, throw fortune cookies in there. You'll double your sales in a minute. And you can even put jetting recommendations on there. So, bottom line to all of these things, just to sum it all up. Complication is the enemy of reliability. Simple carburetors, lawnmower, mini bike, that type of thing, don't even think about it. Just buy it and throw it on there. Motorcycle carburetors, that middle ground, You can get away with it. I have total faith in these things. Automotive carburetors, where you start to get really complicated and there's intricate systems inside the carburetors, I would avoid it unless you have no choice. Because in some cases, these things actually do have a value because you cannot buy an original version of the proper carburetor anymore. They're completely obsoleted. So they fill in the gap with these knockoffs. As long as you know what you're up against and you take care of it accordingly, then it's better than nothing. So do your homework, prepare to dig in for them, and also do some price shopping too, because you'll find the exact same carburetor, like I was looking for this one, you'll find them listed for like 75 bucks, $50. I bought this one for 35. I know that if I kept hunting and I went to some of the off sites, I could probably find it for like $15, $16. I know this because I've seen this in the past. But just for expediency's sake, I just hit Amazon, send it. So keep that in mind too when you're looking to buy one of these things. So that's it. I really can't think of anything else. Yeah, I know. I feel cheap and tawdry with my Chinese carburetor, but you know what? It's going to get the job done. I hope you got something out of that, and I'll see you tomorrow.